What if the story of humanity isn't a straight line from ape to man, but a tangled web of ancient encounters? What if deep within our DNA lie the whispers of beings so old, so distant? They had been separated from us for over 1 million years. Imagine it. Long before Neanderthals or modern humans walked the earth, other humans were already out there, scattered across ancient Eurasia. They were not our ancestors, but our distant cousins, primitive, powerful, and forgotten. Yet somehow, against all odds, our bloodlines met. This is the story of how we interbred with super-archaic humans, and how their legacy still lives within us. The story of our evolution is not a simple march of progress, not the clean ladder we once imagined where each species neatly replaces the one before it, but rather a vast and tangled saga of connection, a story of crossings, reunions, and entanglements that span nearly 2 million years of time. Deep within our DNA lies a record not of purity, but of mingling, of lineages meeting again after ages apart, of ancient unions that quietly shaped the very essence of who we are. Long before modern humans took form, before the Neanderthals or Denisovans drew breath, there walked across the ancient world another kind of people, known now as the super-archaics. They were not myths or monsters, but humans, strange, powerful, and distant, separated from us by more than 1 million years of evolution, yet sharing with us the same spark that drives every generation to explore, survive, and seek connection. Around 1.9 to 2.2 million years ago, these super-archaics embarked on the first great migration out of Africa, spreading across the open plains and dense forests of Eurasia. They were the true pioneers of the human story. Long before anyone called us Homo sapiens, they shaped stone into tools, mastered the rhythm of the hunt, and learned to survive in a world of towering predators and shifting climates. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived and adapted, building a world of their own beneath strange constellations and forgotten skies. Then time moved on. New lineages evolved in Africa, and the descendants of those later humans, the ancestors of the Neanderthals and Denisovans, prepared for their own great journey. Around 700,000 years ago, these Neanderthals began their expansion northward, following rivers and valleys into lands already claimed by the ghosts of deep time. When they arrived in Eurasia, they did not find an empty continent, but one already inhabited by the descendants of the super-archaics, populations that had lived, changed, and endured in isolation for over 1 million years. What followed was not conquest but contact. On the windswept plains of prehistoric Eurasia, under skies thick with snow and smoke, two kinds of humans, separated by more than 1 million years of evolution, stood face to face. Imagine that meeting, the flicker of firelight glinting off stone tools, the wary glances between strangers who were both kin and alien, the echo of ancient voices carried on the wind as curiosity overcame fear. And then, against all odds, they mixed. The genetic evidence makes it clear. The ancestors of Neanderthals and Denisovans interbred with these ancient super-archaic populations, exchanging genes that had been diverging since the dawn of our genus. The amount of genetic mixing was small, perhaps only a few percent, but its significance was enormous. In any other species, such immense evolutionary separation would have meant total reproductive isolation, yet humans, even then, broke that rule. They reached across the gulf of 1 million years and created life together. This single fact changes everything we thought we knew about the boundaries of humanity. It means that species distinctions among our ancestors were never rigid walls, but permeable borders through which genes, ideas, and identities could flow. The super-archaics themselves likely descended from early Homo erectus populations, the same explorers who first ventured out of Africa nearly 2 million years ago. Their presence in Asia was ancient and enduring. They may have persisted in places like China, Indonesia, and Central Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. When the Neanderthals encountered them, the result was not annihilation but exchange. A spark of their DNA entered the genome of the newcomers, embedding the memory of those first wanderers into the genetic fabric of later humans. As the Neanderthals evolved, their descendants split into two distinct groups, the Neanderthals in the west and the Denisovans in the east. Yet even this division did not end the pattern of mingling. The Denisovans, as they spread through Asia, met the remnants of the super-archaics again around 220,000 years ago, suggesting that these ancient populations had survived across millennia, quietly persisting in pockets of the continent, holding on in forests, caves, and valleys that had seen countless human waves come and go. Each encounter added a new thread to the tapestry of our ancestry. Even a few brief unions could leave a lasting genetic legacy, passing fragments of ancient DNA down through unbroken generations. Those fragments, though small, were profound. They carried traces of adaptations, resistances, and biological quirks honed by lives lived in deep time. When we study the DNA of modern humans today, we find echoes of these meetings. Denisovan genes linger most strongly in the peoples of Papua New Guinea, Australia, and parts of East Asia. And hidden within those Denisovan segments lie even older pieces, super-archaic sequences passed down like fossils in our cells. In other words, when modern humans later interbred with Denisovans, we inherited DNA that was already ancient, a genetic time capsule carrying the memory of a world that predated us by nearly 2 million years. This is one of the most astonishing truths about our species. We are living mosaics of countless human types, a biological collage assembled by time. Each generation that mixed blurred the lines a little further, turning evolution from a branching tree into a flowing river with currents that diverge and rejoin, carrying fragments of the past into the present. The very idea of species begins to falter under this revelation. If humans separated for over 1 million years could still produce fertile offspring, then perhaps what we call species is merely a label for convenience, a way of drawing boundaries on a landscape that nature never truly divided. In the bones of the super-archaics, in the genomes of the Neanderthals and Denisovans, and in the living cells of every person alive today, that truth persists. We were never isolated, never pure, never alone. Evolution was not a story of one group surviving while all others vanished, but a continual merging of lives and legacies. The ancient world was full of meetings, at waterholes, in caves, along migration paths, moments when different kinds of humans encountered each other, not as abstractions, but as beings of flesh and will. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they traded, sometimes they fell silent before the firelight, and sometimes, for reasons as old as life itself, they mated. From those rare and fragile connections, whole futures were born. Each union blurred the line between species and carried forward a fragment of memory that would echo across hundreds of millennia until it reached us. Today, as we map our genomes, we can still detect those echoes. A few percent here, a small sequence there, tiny signatures of encounters so ancient that they seem almost mythic. Yet they are real. They tell us that humanity's strength has never come from isolation, but from connection, from our capacity to absorb, adapt, and carry others within us. The story of interbreeding with super-archaic humans is not just about genes. It's about the resilience of life, the permeability of identity, and the truth that every one of us is a living archive of meetings long forgotten. The faces of the super-archaics are lost to time, their bones buried beneath layers of earth and memory, but their legacy endures in every heartbeat. In our veins runs the record of their survival, their courage, their union with those who came after. We are their descendants, their inheritors, their living proof that the human story has always been one of reunion, of long separated branches finding one another again and again across the vast expanse of time. As we peer deeper into the forgotten world of our origins, the ancient expanse of Eurasia unfolds before us, a wild, unforgiving land of ice, forest, and vast open plains where different kinds of humans once crossed paths beneath the same pale skies. Around 700,000 years ago, the ancestors of Neanderthals and Denisovans, the Neanderthals, began their long migration out of Africa, pushing into new frontiers carved by glaciers and rivers. But this was no empty world awaiting discovery. It was already inhabited by the super-archaics, the descendants of the first humans who had left Africa nearly 2 million years before. These were seasoned survivors, shaped by countless generations of adaptation, their lives bound to the rhythms of a primeval Earth. When the Neanderthals arrived, they did not merely encounter rivals, they found distant cousins whose faces carried echoes of their own, a living reflection of their ancient past. The genetic record shows that these meetings were not brief, nor purely hostile. They mingled, shared lives, and left behind offspring who bore the marks of both worlds. Children born from lineages separated for over 1,000,000 years, yet still capable of creating life together. This alone is staggering, for in most animals such an immense gulf would mean complete reproductive isolation. But humanity was always an exception. Our boundaries blurred, our bloodlines intertwined, and our species defined not by purity but by connection. As the Denisovans spread further east, through the vastness of Asia around 200,000 years ago, they too found traces of the super archaics, still clinging to survival in forests, highlands, and tropical valleys. In places like China and Indonesia, fossils reveal faces that were neither fully primitive nor modern, broad-skulled, heavy-browed survivors of a deep lineage that refused to vanish. On the island of Java, Homo erectus may have endured until only 100,000 years ago, still shaping tools as the ice advanced across the north. When the Denisovans met these remnants, they mingled again and fragments of their ancient genes were carried forward, embedded in the DNA of later humans. Even today, people of Papua New Guinea, Melanesia, and Australia carry as much as 5% Denisovan DNA, and hidden within that are even older genetic fragments from the super archaics themselves, meaning that their blood carries the legacy of beings who walked the earth nearly 2,000,000 years ago. This makes them among the last living vessels of a story, written across the deepest chapters of time. The fossils from Cima de los Huesos in Spain, more than 400,000 years old, tell a similar tale. Early Neanderthals whose genomes still carry the ghostly imprint of ancient interbreeding, proof that even before distinct species emerged, their ancestors had already exchanged genes with older lineages. The split between Neanderthals and Denisovans, about 700,000 years ago, was not a clean division. It was a gradual divergence woven through with ancient connections. Evolution, it seems, never moved in tidy steps or clean separations. It flowed like a network of rivers, merging and dividing, carrying fragments of one generation into the next. Across the frozen steppes of Central Asia, in the misty forests of China, and on the volcanic shores of Indonesia, different kinds of humans coexisted, each lighting their fires beneath the same stars. Some fought, others avoided each other, but sometimes they reached across the divide, and in those fleeting unions, they created something that endured beyond their extinction. The genes they shared became threads in the great fabric of our ancestry, surviving ice ages, migrations, and extinctions, passed down quietly through Neanderthals, through Denisovans, and finally into us. In every human alive today lies the unbroken echo of those meetings, of eyes that once met across the darkness of prehistory, of children born from impossible unions, of a world where no species of human ever truly stood alone. Humanity's story was never one of replacement, but of entanglement, of reaching across divides, and of the timeless will to connect, endure, and remain. As the ages turned and the Neanderthals and Denisovans came to rule the ancient continents, the echoes of even older unions still pulsed quietly through their blood, shaping every step of the human story. When modern humans finally began their own journey out of Africa, around 200,000 years ago, they entered a world already inhabited by the ghosts of the past, Neanderthals in the west, Denisovans in the east, and within them the lingering genes of the super archaics, beings who had walked the earth nearly 2,000,000 years before. Across icy plains, deep forests, and sunlit valleys, these different kinds of humans met, sometimes as rivals, sometimes as companions, and sometimes as lovers. In the glow of a shared fire or the silence of a cave, lines that had been separated for over 1,000,000 years crossed once again, and from those crossings came children whose blood carried the legacy of all who came before. Even today, traces of those encounters live within us, fragments of Neanderthal DNA shaping our immunity and appearance, Denisovan genes helping some of us breathe in thin mountain air, and beneath them, faint echoes of the super archaics themselves. The human genome is not a clean ledger of progress, but a living record of connection, a braided current flowing through time where every extinction became transformation and every meeting left a permanent mark. The last Neanderthals may have vanished 40,000 years ago, but their essence endures within us, as do the Denisovans and the forgotten super archaics whose faces we will never see. We are not the pure descendants of a single species, but the living synthesis of many, a collage of love, conflict, curiosity, and survival stretched across 2 million years. The fires they lit still burn in our hearts. The tools they made live on in our hands, and their stories are written in our very cells. To be human is to be a mosaic of memory, to carry within us the whispers of those who came before, to embody the unbroken truth that life has always found a way to unite across the divides of time.